have we ever stopped to ponder what God truly signifies? The notion of the divine has been a linchpin of human society, sculpting cultures and steering history. But how have our interpretations of God transformed across ages? And has the pursuit of spiritual awakening clouded our recollection of the primal definition of God? From the inception of human consciousness, our predecessors peered into the depths of their minds, probing for answers to life's most profound enigmas. They identified the divine within their consciousness, linking the prosperous outcomes of their lives to the workings of a divine presence, the wisdom of the mind, the mysteries of consciousness, the ability to reason and decipher. All were seen as manifestations of divine forces. This was an era when divinity was not an abstract idea, but a significant facet of everyday existence, a time when our comprehension of God was entrenched more in intellectual enlightenment than it is in the present day. Then dawned the age of the great prophets and philosophers. From Abraham to Alexander the Great, they endeavored to decode the enigmatic, to perceive the divine, to attain enlightenment. They posited a fresh perspective, a self-realization that questioned prevailing beliefs. They proposed that the divine was not limited to the celestial or terrestrial but dwelled within us, in our consciousness. This was a transformative concept that laid the groundwork for organized religions. It proposed that divinity was accessible to all, which challenged the established power hierarchies of the period, setting the stage for the onset of orthodox religions. However, power often incites opposition. The reigning authorities of that era, enlightened beings who utilized their spiritual wisdom to rule, were threatened by this emerging individualism. They perceived the burgeoning self-aware individuals as a challenge to their sovereignty. Consequently, they endeavored to stifle this newfound wisdom, choosing to keep the masses uninformed and retain their dominion. The prevalent religions at the time morphed into instruments of this suppression, rendering the idea of divine entities vague and theoretical, nurturing ignorance over enlightenment. Yet, not all faiths followed this trend. Religions like Jainism emerged, expressing a contrasting viewpoint. Prominent figures such as Mahavira surfaced, not as monarchs, but as spiritual guides. They repudiated the concept of exploiting spirituality for power. Instead, they chose to disseminate their wisdom, uncover the truth, and assist others on the path to enlightenment. They reiterated that divinity was not something to dread or manipulate, but to comprehend and welcome. As per the Gnostic interpretations, the doctrines of Jesus mirrored the principles of Jainism, focusing on self-realization and enlightenment for all. He was an enlightened individual whose teachings were eventually misconstrued and commandeered by those in power. The mainstream Abrahamic religions, initially meant to lead individuals on a path to spiritual liberation, were sadly turned into instruments of control and manipulation. The concept of God was transformed into an enigmatic and abstract notion, exploited as a means to retain power rather than guiding individuals towards enlightenment. And so, here we are in the now, an era where the authentic comprehension of God is frequently obscured by the cacophony of belief systems and teachings. However, when we reflect on our spiritual voyage, we realize that the quintessence of the divine has been embedded within us throughout our journey. We understand that God is not a distant notion but a fabric of our consciousness, a route towards self-discovery and illumination. In conclusion, our interpretation of God has transformed from perceiving divinity in all elements to a self-conscious realization that questions the usual norms, to an enigmatic and theoretical notion exploited for manipulation. Nevertheless, the core of the divine is ever present within us, poised for revelation. The journey to illumination isn't via unquestioning belief, but through self-realization and comprehension. Perhaps as we persist on our spiritual voyage, we will rediscover the authentic understanding of God that our forebears once grasped.